Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the council meeting for Monday, December the 11th, 2023. Please rise for the playing of the national anthem and a moment of reflection.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command.
Car ton bras s'est porté l'épée, il s'est porté la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits.
God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Please be seated. At this time, I'd now look to Councillor McPherson to read the land acknowledgement.
The land on which council meets today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishbek peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many Indigenous peoples made up of First Nation, Inuit, and Métis. The Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement should remind us of our responsibility to ensure the Dish, the territories on which we live and work, is never emptied, and that we take care of the land and its inhabitants in a way that ensures its future sustainability.
Thank you, Councillor McPherson. The Mayor's report. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening. A bunch of news to get to and some announcements. First of all, the city continues to work on the 2024 to 2026 multi-year operating rate, which is water, wastewater, and parking, and capital budgets, and we're looking to residents for their input. Community input ensures that the budget reflects the services and the programs that are important to residents in the community, and lets us know where people think that our resources should be focused. Lots of ways to provide feedback for residents. City staff are going to be hosting 2 more kiosks on the budget for residents to attend this week. The first one will be December 13th at Fairview Mall from noon until 7, and December 15th at St. Catharines Public Library at the downtown branch from 9 to 5. And folks can also provide their feedback by completing the budget survey before December 15th. That can be found at engagestc.ca/budget. So please get over there and get involved over the next few weeks so we can hear from you. Registration for the city's winter recreation and aquatic program will open online for residents tomorrow, December the 12th at 6 p.m. at stcatharines.ca/activestc. In-person registration will start at 8:30 a.m. on Wednesday, December the 13th at the Kiwanis Aquatic Center, and activities will be available to all ages and abilities. If you're headed to downtown St. Catharines or Port Dalhousie for holiday activities, you'll be able to enjoy the gift of free parking for 3 hours on weekday afternoons beginning today and running through Friday, December 29th. The parking promotion will be in effect at city-owned on-street metered spots and city-owned parking lots with pay machines. Speaking of events in the downtown and taking advantage of the free parking, make sure to visit Market Square for Winter at the Market the next 2 Wednesdays in December from 4 to 8 p.m. for all your last-minute gifts. Shoppers will be able to choose from a selection of preserves and local wines, as well as handmade items such as toys, games, jewelry, home decor, beauty products, and more, all while supporting the local community. For a full list of vendors, visit stcatharines.ca/market events. City of St. Catharines is currently reviewing its zoning bylaw and conducting a housekeeping amendment. Draft materials are available for review at engagestc.ca/zoning. And planning staff will be hosting an open house this Thursday, December 14th from 3 to 7 in the atrium here at City Hall. Key elements of the amendment include accessory dwelling units, parking requirements, and landscaping, among other things. Additionally, tonight's motion directing staff to create permissions for 4 units as of right will, if passed, be a part of the overall housekeeping amendment, so residents can comment at the open house on that process as well. Some congratulations to hand out. Congrats to the city staff in the Community, Recreation, and Culture Services Department for recognition as one of the top participating communities in Culture Days 2023. St. Catharines ranked 9th overall nationwide and 6th among mid-sized cities, with an impressive 69 events organized for the 2023 Culture Days celebration. Annual recognition is a fantastic indicator that St. Catharines is an active champion for arts and culture, so thank you for staff for championing those efforts. Congratulations to 5 volunteers from the South Shore Search and Rescue who recently were awarded the prestigious Stearns Rescue of the Year honors from the Canadian Safe Boating Council, the crew's 2nd national award this year. The crew earned the recognition when it rescued 8 individuals from the churning waters of Lake Ontario in a single mission on July 24th, 2022, which was the largest rescue ever conducted by the volunteer agency. The entire mission took 106 minutes and saved 8 lives. Congratulations to all 5 volunteers. Special mention, though, to Brent Dawson of St. Catharines for his efforts as a part of the crew. And a community thank you to Robert Knoll and the volunteers who made the 10th Help Portrait event at Robertson Hall possible this past weekend. The purpose of the event was to bring a smile to Niagara residents by offering a free framed 8x10 portrait to those who usually could not afford a professional portrait. Thank you to the many volunteers who helped with photography, editing photos, the craft area, greeters, and to those who donated towards the cost of the day. And finally, some upcoming events. A reminder to everyone to join us tomorrow, Tuesday, December 12th at 12 p.m. for the city's 33rd annual Civic Christmas Carol concert at St. Thomas Church. The event will feature music from Laura Secord Secondary School Concert Choir, the St. Catharines Civic Brass Ensemble, and the Ridley College Vocal Ensemble. The doors open at 11:30, and donations to community care are encouraged. I hope to see as many people as are able to out tomorrow. Let It Glow, a celebration of light, continues with beautiful light displays to enjoy in Rennie Park in Port Dalhousie and downtown lighting installations located at Meridian Center, Rankinbridge, James Street Alley, and City Hall. All displays can be enjoyed from now until January 7th. And if you hadn't had a chance to get out, please go out and check it out. They are absolutely beautiful. Rennie Park is fantastic looking right now. Also, you can celebrate New Year's Eve by spending time at St. Catharines Kiwanis Aquatic Center at one of 4 hour-long free leisure swims happening on December 31st at 9, 10, 11 a.m., and noon. And you can pre-register at stcatharines.ca/December swim. And Seymour Hanna's Sports and Entertainment Center will host free public skating on New Year's Eve from 9:30 a.m. until noon on all 4 pads, one of which will host the popular Glow in the Dark event, complete with glow sticks, character visits, and a family photo booth. Watch for registration information at stcatharines.ca/activestc. And even though it's not in the mayor's report, I will point out that the annual New Year's levy will once again be taking place on New Year's Day from 11 a.m. onward at the Lake Street Armory. All are invited to attend. This is a free event. For those folks who live in the Hague neighborhood, wakey wakey at 11:15 when the big gun gets fired off. My apologies to our St. Patrick's Ward city councilors for the complaints and the phone calls they will receive after that. But as those around the horseshoe know, this is an opportunity for us to greet the community. So I do encourage all of my council colleagues to be out. And I encourage all of those out in the community who are interested. It is a time-honored tradition with the Lincoln and Welland Regiment here in town, and so your presence is welcomed at the New Year's levy. As I said, 11 a.m. on the first of the new year at the Lake Street Armory. With that, are there any additions to the mayor's report? Any other events people would like to bring to their attention? Councillor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to share that on Saturday night, the volunteers at the Port Dalhousie Beautification and Works Committee held the 6th annual candlelight stroll, and it was just amazing how well attended it was. We met at the church there at St. John's at Anglican at Main Street and Ann, and they estimate that they had over 400 people. They were just an amazing crowd, and the volunteers organized 11 different porch-side entertainment locations where there was different caroling and singing and steel drums, walk down and then back to the church. Thank you so much for the volunteers that organized that, and I know it took a lot of work to organize.
Thank you, Councillor Garcia. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just this past weekend, the Grantham Lions Club had their family breakfast and met Mr. and Mrs. Claus there. It was very well attended with over 500 breakfasts, and all the children had a great time meeting Mr. and Mrs. Claus, and they could get their photos and everything as well, and it was really good, and we thank the community for coming out and help support the Grantham Lions Club. And on the weekend as well, one of our local business people, Sally McGar, actually had a very nice open house for Christmas, celebrating her 35 years in business in the city. So, shout out to her, 35 years, way to go.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lindell.
I just wanted to mention that the Meriton Lions held their annual turkey and ham draw and their elimination draw about a week and a half ago. It was very successful. Lots of turkeys given out, lots of hams given out. Councillor Miller was selling tickets diligently and making sure everyone had one. It was amazing. And the Meriton Legion had their turkey and ham roll on Friday, and it was also very successful, and they had a really, really good turnout this year.
Thank you, Councillor Lindell. Councillor Miller.
Thank you. Yeah, I missed my calling selling raffle tickets. I don't know if that's a job, but I just want to say Friday night was the final of the St. Catharines Standard Basketball Tournament. It was the 60th anniversary this year. Who won the game? St. Francis Phoenix defeated the Eden Flyers. Very good game. And also the city was helping the Standard Tournament Committee find some old photos and things to celebrate the 60th anniversary, and the organizers were very thankful to our museum staff for that.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. I will point out, I believe Ridley won the consolation final, which I got to be at as well, which was fantastic because Ridley is one of the founding members of the Standard Tournament, and I got to hear all about it from one of the original's daughter who was there. Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Excuse me. I was able to represent you yesterday at the beginning of the 125th anniversary of the St. Catharines Golf and Country Club. Extremely well attended. They have a lot of very exciting events provincially and internationally coming up in the next year, so congratulations to them for having a facility that it is second to none in a lot of golf courses and curling venues in the province. So it was a great event. Next, there's a new street in town as far as decorations are concerned. I was able to attend the lighting of Heathcote Terrace, which is just off of Croydon. Doesn't have quite the length that our friends in Port Dalhousie have, but they had a great event. All money that was raised went to Gillian Place, and they're looking forward to making it bigger and better and being even more competitive in years to come. And lastly, I'd like to remind everyone that this weekend, the St. Catharines Symphony has their Christmas Symphony. It's led by our wonderful conductor, Brad Tkachuk. And we have vocalists coming in from Toronto to sing with our wonderful symphony. So I invite anyone to attend. There's still some seats available. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor. And I will actually throw out, just because you mentioned, myself, Councillor Garcia, and Councillor Williamson had the opportunity to be there for the lighting at Rio Lane. I know a couple of other councillors were able to make it out later on in the evening, but a fantastic event. Thank you to Tony and his family. As always, it was beautiful, very heavily attended, and really it's mind-blowing the amount of work that goes into doing that. So kudos to them, kudos to Heathcote. And I would encourage councillors, if there are streets in your part of the city that you think folks should check out, as someone with young kids, I know it's always a good way to spend an evening, so feel free to put that out on social media and we'll try and collect them, maybe under a hashtag of Christmas Lights STC or something along those lines so that people can find those. Are there any others? All right, seeing none, I will move on to the clerk for the adoption of the agendas.
So we had a request to change the order so that item 9.2 would be discussed before item 9.1. So that would be Grape and Wine prior to the Rodman Art Institute of Niagara update. And we have a number of additional correspondence that have been placed in Council's Sugar Sync folder. First is a confidential memo for the First Ontario Performing Arts Centre regarding the Board of Management member recruitment. The second is the memorandum from Director of EFES regarding self-cleaning public washroom update and operating hours. The third is a letter from Canadian Polish Congress, Niagara District regarding Nicholas Copernicus via addition to street name. Memorandum from the City Treasurer and the Director of EFES for additional information regarding the 2024 to 2026 multi-year staff proposed capital budget, 4-year forecast, and asset management status. There's a memo from the Manager of Business Planning and Strategic Services, and that's an update on the Neil Peart Memorial at Lakeside Park. And there's a memorandum from Parking Supervisor regarding the phased removal of old parking meters.
All right, Councillor Garcia, did you have any other amendments?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to add Mr. Mike Slater to speak to 9.3 on volunteer organizations.
Okay. So we'll add Mike Slater to speak to 9.3. Can I have a motion to adopt the agenda as amended? Councillor Lindell, and a seconder, Councillor Williamson. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. So we'll move on to item 3, which is adoption of the minutes, that council adopt the minutes of the council budget meeting held on November 22nd, 2023, and regular council meeting held November 27th, 2023. Can I have a mover? Councillor Garcia, a seconder, Councillor Miller. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest this evening? Seeing none. We move on to number 5. There's a request from Councillor Stevens to refer additional correspondence, sub-item 3, the letter from the Canadian Polish Congress, Niagara District, re-honoring Nicholas Copernicus via addition to street name, to staff to prepare a report about adding the distinction of Nicholas Copernicus Way to Oblate Street. Okay. So we will move to the motion that council approve the consent agenda, save and accept those items brought forward for discussion. Can I have a mover for that? Councillor Kushner. And I will look to the clerk.
Tonight's consent agenda includes item 6.1, Corporate Support Services, the annual status report on multi-year accessibility plan. Item 6.2, Financial Management Services, 2024 tax due dates and interim billing bylaw. Item 6.3, Financial Management Services, History of City Reserves from 2018 to 2023. And item 6.4, Legal and Clerk Services, Council Correspondence, and that's save and accept additional correspondence sub-item 3, which is being referred to staff for a report. Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
Councillor Stevens.
Yes.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Lindell.
Yes.
Councillor McPherson.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Ratzlaff.
Yes.
And Mayor Cisco.
Yes.
And that's carried.
All right, so we are moving into our public meetings in a moment. Before we do that, I wanted to make a declaration to all of the presenters we will have this evening. Council chambers in all municipalities in our country represents the seat of local democracy. The many acts that govern us understand the necessity of the collective voice when decisions are being made to grow our spaces, pass our bylaws, and to seek opinions into very complex issues. We recognize the right of the majority to decide, the minority to be heard, the public to have an opportunity to participate, and all participants to be treated with courtesy and respect. It is imperative that elected officials, citizens, and staff have input, and it is paramount that we listen to one another and question one another, but that we understand we do this in a way that never undermines any person's ability or their dignity in our chambers. With that, we'll move on to 7.1, Municipal Works Operations, a bylaw to regulate the uses that occupy or require temporary closure of or otherwise affect highways. Notice of consideration of a bylaw to regulate the uses that occupy or require temporary closure of or otherwise affect highways has been published in accordance with the city's notice bylaw. The public meeting will proceed as follows. Members of the public wishing to delegate were advised to register by 9 a.m. today. No one requested to speak. In a moment, I will ask if anybody here wishes to speak. After the speakers, any of which come forward, have had their opportunity, the public meeting will be closed, and then council will be able to ask staff questions and consider the report recommendation. At this time, the public meeting is now open. Before we move on, I will also ask councilors when we are asking questions this evening, if we can refrain from using any specific examples and speak only broadly to the application of the bylaw across the city. If councilors want to speak individually about individual instances, we will go in camera. But we can't, in open council, speak to individual situations or developments within the community in the context of this bylaw. With that, does anyone in attendance wish to speak? Ms. Brathwaite, come on forward. The lectern is yours, and you've been here before, so you know how it works.
I do. Press here, right?
You're already on.
Already on. Wow, amazing. Thank you. And thank you for your time and allowing me to come up to speak without being prepared enough to register. So thank you for that. Obviously, I'm speaking with regards to the bylaw and the report that is on the floor. And so just, as you know, with the recent community survey that was done by the city, safety has been identified as a top priority by over 89% of the respondents. This is the reason I'm speaking to this bylaw. This bylaw is imperative to make sure our residents are safe. I have seen firsthand on our downtown streets how unsafe road and sidewalk closures in our downtown have impacted children and older adults who have been forced to walk or roll under cranes, beside construction equipment that's not safely fenced off, and walk through live lanes of traffic in order to get around the construction areas. This is not safe. I've also heard firsthand from numerous businesses how these unsafe road closures have negative impacts on the businesses, with people afraid to come to their store because they cannot get to them. City staff have done their best, and I will give them full credit for going above and beyond to try and make these situations safer. But let's be honest, without a bylaw, unfortunately, it's only at people's will. My only concern with this bylaw is that as identified on page 3 of the report, under operational implications, and if it's okay, I will just read it, there will be no direct operational implications to this report. It should be noted that this bylaw will be enforced on a complaint basis using existing staff. We will respond to situations as quickly as possible, but there may be a delay depending on availability of staff to respond. This causes me grave concern. The issues that we see currently need to be acted on promptly. They're often resulting in 911 calls because people don't know who to call because of the unsafe situations. I would recommend that the money collected from these bylaws when infractions are made be split. I recommend that 50% goes towards staffing costs so that these issues can be identified, not just on a complaint basis, but proactively, and that they can be handled and responded to immediately. And that the other 50% go to the community that's directly impacted, either through planting of trees, promotion of nearby businesses, additional signage, or other initiatives to provide support to those directly impacted. I thank you for your time, and I thank the staff for their time in putting together this report and this bylaw so quickly, and I thank you and for putting the safety of our residents first.
Thank you, Ms. Brathwaite. If you just want to remain for a second, are there any questions for the presenter? All right, seeing none, thank you for your presentation. Does anyone else in attendance wish to speak? All right, seeing none, can I have a motion to close the public meeting? Councilor McPherson, seconded by Councilor Phillips. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. So the public meeting is now closed and council's called to order. Persons wishing to receive notice of council's decision should submit a written request to the office of the city clerk. Before we get to questions of staff, who wants to move and second the recommendation in the report? Councilor McPherson, Councilor Ratzlaff. So it is up on the board. Are there any speakers, any questions on council? Councilor Miller?
I'm just wondering if maybe staff could respond to Ms. Braithwaite's suggestion in terms of the fees collected from this bylaw.
with respect to the fees and I suppose to the proactive nature of the bylaw enforcement. Mr. Chania?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the council member, with respect to the bylaw, when you say fees collected, are you referring to the potential prosecution and the fine amount? For clarification? Yes. So the way that works, the process is that if a complaint comes in, an investigation commences, and a reason for prosecution is actually found, then charges would be laid in the provincial offenses court, and the fines would stem from the charges and whether or not the individual or the corporation would be found guilty or plead guilty to the charges. The municipality gets a very small very small percentage of the charge. I think they look at annually, so all the fine amounts to be paid would be paid into the court system. And at one point in the process, the municipality would get a small amount of it. Does that answer your question?
So is the feeling that the fee, any money collected wouldn't be significant enough to make a difference in, maybe this is more operational, in the operations of the bylaw department in terms of its ability to be proactive or quicker reactive, be faster reacting?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the council member, I cannot speak to the operational part because that would be handled by bylaw enforcement. So depending on once the complaints come out, how fast they react and they go out and they do the investigation and whatever they find evidence-wise and putting together a prosecution package that would have to be coming up through legal, looking at reviewing it by the prosecutors, assigned to the files and pushing it through the court system. I mean, this is not an overnight thing, but obviously city staff deals with these issues very seriously, and we try to push it through the system as fast as possible.
I will say very, very briefly to the notion of proactive enforcement on this particular issue, and the CAO or deputy CAO can correct me if I'm wrong, but there would be a cost associated with that. I don't believe it would be covered by whatever might come through fines in this particular case. We would have to add staff to be able to deal with that because we have, just on my discussions with folks in the bylaw department, they're pretty busy going out and dealing with the complaints that come in. So to add a proactive, which would indicate regular checks of those sites where, you know, there are closures, it would likely necessitate adding staff, which wouldn't be able to be recovered necessarily by the amount of fines.
Okay, thank you. And I know this is not specific to this bylaw, that there are certain residents who feel like we could be more proactive on certain parking. So I guess that will be a conversation maybe for more like budget time decisions around the bylaw enforcement office.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I'm not sure who this would go to, so I'll just throw it out there. Is there an opportunity, I know there's a mention that it would be integrated into the city's non-parking, into the AMPS system. Is there an opportunity to have this as part of the AMPS system? Or, I don't know who.
Dear staff, don't everybody jump up at once.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the council member, we are actively looking at every single bylaw, which whether or not we can put it through the AM system, and if there's an option or the opportunity, we will actively put it in that bylaw to ensure that we can speed up enforcement and make sure that all these matters are being handled as quickly as possible.
Okay, thank you. And I mean, I want to thank staff because staff has done an amazing job to try and handle these kinds of complaints and deal with different situations that have come up in regards to development. But it would be nice if it was and I know it has to be a reported system, but I think to Ms. Braithwaite's point is, you know, when a road is closed for an extended period of time, if it can't be dealt with that day, then you're impacting not just businesses, but you're impacting even people's enjoyment of the area that they live. And I think it's important if we can have it as part of the AMP so that the fines are going out quicker and perhaps, you know, getting people to respond and change their behaviors. That would be really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As well, I'm not 100% sure who to direct this. And I know I deal with bylaw a lot. I have a lot of complaints from the residents in my area sometimes. So and I know about the proactiveness, and it's tough. But in this particular case, and it might be a suggestion or whatever, so permits and that are issued when there's construction going on. And so I know we're trying to upgrade the system here so everybody's on board together, but so if we know that there's a site going on, the bit of proactiveness would be when in the first day or two when these sites are happening, that it can be checked out and then it can be addressed instead of having complaints and fines. I'm sure no one wants to pay fines, and as long as everybody's in compliance, everybody's happy. So just a little bit of suggestion or that could be done. I don't know.
All right, that's been noted by the CAO. Seeing no other hands at this time, we have the motion on the screen, and I will look to the clerk to call. Did we not have a mover and a seconder? Councillor McPherson and Ratzlaff? All right, so I will look to the clerk to call the roll.
Councillor McPherson.
Yes.
Councillor Ratzlaff.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
Councillor Lindell.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Stevens.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
And Mayor Cisco.
Yes.
And that's carried.
All right, we'll now move on to the discussion reports, and we're starting with Economic Development and Tourism Services, Niagara Grape and Wine Festival Fee for Service Agreement Renewal. Prior to discussing the report, I will look to Mary Ann Wilson, the Board of Directors, Alan Schmidt, the Board of Directors, and Dorian Anderson, the Executive Director of Niagara Grape and Wine Festival, to provide a presentation. And I believe there is a handout.
Hello, everyone. This is actually my first time here. I'm Mary Ann Wilson. I am the Vice President of Marketing, Strategy, and Member Engagement with CA Niagara, and also here to represent the Board of Directors for the Grape and Wine Festival. And I just want to take a moment to thank you for your support over many years, and we have a lot of exciting information that we want to share with you this evening.
And hello again, everyone. I'm Dorian Anderson. I've met many of you before. I'm the Executive Director of the Niagara Grape and Wine Festival, and very happy to be here standing in front of you, especially in festive sweaters. Had I known, I would have definitely dressed up. As you know, we have just completed our last fee-for-service agreement that started in 2019. And also, this is the 25th year of funding that the festival has received from the City of St. Catharines. And as you can tell, the festival has grown and changed and developed quite significantly over that time. And I'd like to suggest that this is just the beginning. Do I tap, or how do we? Oh, thank you. Okay. So I'll very briefly go over this because all of you have been through my presentations before, but the Niagara Grape and Wine Festival is 72 years old and a very important part of the cultural community of Niagara. We are a not-for-profit organization, and we really focus our efforts on showcasing the grape and wine industry and its importance to Niagara, as well as the culture, both arts, culinary, and just the community culture of the region. About $5 million plus every year in tourism spending is driven directly through the festival, with about 95,000 visitors to the downtown core each September. And starting last year, we really focused on Niagara First approach. So most of our suppliers and performers are from Niagara, with an estimated tally of about $500,000 that is spent in Niagara through the festival. Next slide, please. We've also been working very hard since 2018 to elevate Grape and Wine. So we've spent over $250,000 in aesthetic enhancements to the Montebello Park experience, some of which you can see on the screen right there. We also expanded the footprint of the park so we could include the historic Rose Garden and some of the other more beautiful parts of the park, so that when we're looking at it through social media and other means, people are seeing the beauty of the downtown core. We introduced some VIP elements, as well as lots of other food and drink options, to really try to bring tourists and new markets to the signature festival of Niagara Grape and Wine. We did some community outreach after our last festival, and our consumer satisfaction rating was 4.8 stars out of 5. We're very happy with that. Next slide, please. So what's next? We feel like we've developed a great set of programs across all of our year-long programming, but we really want to focus on driving economic benefit that matches the cultural benefit of the festival. So we've done this in a few different ways: the new strategic plan, which we just distributed to you, as well as engaging a sponsorship consultant out of the GTA to help us look from the outside in at our festival and get get the ideas of prospective sponsors and visitors. Next slide, please. So the strategic plan, which we will only briefly touch on, really focused on a few things. It identified that we are a very, very strong part of the community and a source of civic pride, but we have huge opportunity areas where it comes to tourism and related economic benefit, especially to reach outside of the region. Next slide, please. Trying to stick to my clock this time. You'll see here, this is an image of the Niagara Ice Wine Gala. This is an idea of an example of what we can do when we're given an opportunity to renovate programming. This event, the Niagara Ice Wine Gala, had been held at the casino for many years. Attendance was dwindling. We weren't getting the tourists we were looking for. So the board took a big leap. We reintroduced it at the Niagara Parks Power Station, and it was an unbelievable event. We had 25 media personalities. We'd struggled to get media in the past, and over 10 million media impressions, including Canada.com, and a bunch of national eyes were on Niagara Falls and the Niagara Grape and Wine Festival. Next slide, please. We also launched Brunch by the Lake last year. So again, this is something to reach all new audiences. 90% or 75% were new visitors that had never been part of the Grape and Wine Festival before. 65% were tourists. So again, these are examples of what we're able to do when we're given some flexibility in programming to create exciting things that are on trend. Next slide, please. So what we'd like to do now is to reinvest in our signature festival, Niagara Grape and Wine. We want to be able to evolve the festival to match those successes that we've had in our other festivals. We know that 78% of the people that come to Grape and Wine in the fall are from the local region, which is great for community pride, but doesn't give us the economic drivers that we're really hoping to bring forward. We've had very exciting conversations with a bunch of Niagara area partners. I don't want to get too detailed at this point, but we have some exciting things that are in the works. We'd like to talk to you about the opportunity, first of all, of extending or renewing our fee-for-service agreement, but also to have some opportunity to look at changing up potentially that first weekend of Montebello Park. So we're not just washing and repeating, but we're creating something new and exciting that will put St. Catharines on the map. Next slide, please. And this is just reinforcing that we are very well aligned with other key tourism strategies, both the national strategy and the new Uncork Ontario strategy that was presented last year. Wine-focused events are key tourism drivers, and we want to bring that money here to the city. This is just reinforcing what I just said. But I would like to just point a couple things out. We're hoping that the fee-for-service agreement will continue to increase by $5,000 a year through the next 5 years of partnership. Just for some context, that actually doesn't even cover the cost of living increase for our security and parade operations alone. So what we're asking for is what I would like to consider a modest increase year over year to help us manage those very, very highly increasing expenses so that we can keep Montebello Park and the parade free for guests. Thank you. Thank you very much. Sorry I went over.
All right, thank you for the presentation. Questions? Councillor Phillips.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you for your presentation, and I can tell my fellow councilors, it is definitely an honor to be on the Grape and Wine Festival board. It is one of the best-run boards I've ever been on, and a credit to the city. You mentioned about the first weekend changing compared to the second weekend and more involvement downtown with our businesses. What do you have planned? How are you going to do that?
Well, at this point, everything is very, at the very basic level. So we are working with partners, the First Ontario Performing Arts Centre. We're having exciting discussions with them, as well as the Meridian Centre and the Niagara Artist Centre. And Rachel is actually next on our call list, depending on how this meeting goes. But what we're looking to do is to not have Montebello Park open the first weekend and convert programming to downtown. So that would really kind of drive, after we spoke to some of the businesses, we realized that they weren't really getting a lot of traffic during that first weekend of Montebello. And so what we're looking to do is, rather than having people diverted to the park, have activities happening right in the downtown core.
Thank you. Council, I'm sure you read in the report that the Grape and Wine Festival has a line of credit from the city. Mm-hmm. It's never been used, and actually it's decreasing. So as far as asking for another $5,000 a year, it shows you how economically feasible and reliable this board is to us. So I definitely support that. You mentioned the cost of security, and would you just kind of give us an idea of, for instance, how much does security cost? How much does it cost to put that the big elaborate stage up there, just to give us an idea, because I know what we get in grant money and donations from businesses and that, but I think council would be interesting to know the expenses that we have to undergo.
So the budget to operate Montebello Park as it is about $1.1 million. Security is about $125,000. That's just for security guards, not including fencing. Insurance has gone over $30,000 now because it's a 2-week event that includes alcohol. The Grand Parade actually has now about $35,000, and that's with us being very conservative on the kinds of acts that we bring in. So as an example, our security bill has gone up $30,000 since 2018. A lot of that has to do with minimum wage and the fact that they cannot find people to do that kind of work anymore. So instead of paying $22 an hour, we're paying $29 and $33 an hour per guard.
Thank you. And keep in mind for those people who are watching and to council that access to the park is free. And the bands cost money too. So Thank you very much for all you do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. Councillor Kushner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Grape and Wine is a regional concept. What's the contribution by the other levels of government?
So I'm excited to tell you, after what was one of the goals came out of last year's presentation, the city of Niagara Falls is now a $25,000 sponsor for the Ice Wine Festival, as well as Niagara Casino, so they're working together, which is great. The Tourism Partnership of Niagara has sponsored between this year and last year about $200,000 through their various programs towards marketing. And then Niagara on the Lake and the Niagara Benchlands both are doing in-kind support through photography and videography and are building us into their 2025 budgets. We are also applying for federal grants. We actually have one that was submitted today. So as soon as any of those become available, the Tourism Growth Program that was just announced last week, we're in there. So we're applied for Ice Wine. We'll also be applying for Fall Festival as well. And then the Experience Ontario, of course, provincial grant.
Well done, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kushner. Councillor Miller.
Thank you. I'm actually not going to ask you about migrant workers for the first time.
That's too bad, because I'm ready.
Oh, you had it. Well, maybe you can. Okay, maybe I will then. I'll give you the opportunity. Can you tell us about some of the programming and your involvement with including migrant workers in the festival? I got to be consistent.
I actually said to Marianne, just to cue you up, you're going to get this question. Yeah, I think that's one of the things we're really, really working on is finding ways for lots of different community groups to get involved. The parade has always been the focus of that, right? So we allow lots of schools and organizations to have a public stage. Same thing with local musicians. of course, in Montebello Park. We are trying also to bring in private sector partnerships. So Archive Wine Bar last year was an amazing downtown place. We brought them as a featured partner in the park, and they had their own area in the bandshell. We're also working with about 25 chefs from the greater Niagara area, most of them from St. Catharines, throughout the year in different programming elements, and trying to give them as much media attention as we can. And then I actually, through Robin, after last year, we've reached out to Quest Health Group, and we're looking to see if there's a way we can develop a fundraising event similar to what they do at the Pinot Noir celebration that can potentially help that group out as well. So, and then of course, Community Care has been our charity of choice for many years, so we work on lots of programs with them throughout the year. And Marianne can speak to the migrant worker program.
Yes, so one of the obvious important elements and the synergies with CA Niagara is bike safety. So we've actually been working with some of the migrant workers to see, like, what do they need? So do they need helmets? Do they need repairs? Do they need videos in different dialects around safety? So we thought that is a great connection and part of the reason why we are a sponsor, CA Niagara Travel, of the festival, because we just can see that great community connection. So hope to continue on our Safety for Life program, which includes the bike safety program.
Thank you for that. And I know the city, I'm going to hopefully get the city involved in the Grape Wine after party that includes migrant workers, and maybe we'll give you a call as well about how we can help promote that to the workers themselves. My question was just specifically in the report, it mentions about the just some of the background information about consumer participation and spending, and the attendance at the fall festival is down, which is, can you just, like, what level are we looking at? Is that, do we think that's like pandemic related, or where's that at right now, I suppose?
I think a lot of it is nationwide. I think festivals and events across the country have all seen some attrition. Some of it is COVID related, a lot of it's economy related. And so we really looked hard at the fall festival this year after it was over to find out where those gaps are for us. So to give you an example, the first weekend in Montebello Park, year over year, the festival loses between $35,000 and $60,000 a year just by being open. Part of that is because of the expense of operating the park, keeping the security there as much as we need in between those two weekends. So about 70% of the visitors come on the parade weekend, which we know. So that's the other reason that we're hoping to renovate that first weekend is we want to be a sustainable festival. We don't want to be reliant on grant funding. You know, the vast majority, I think 60% of our revenues come through event ticket sales and food and beverage sales, which is the right model. That's where it should come from. So by allowing us to renovate that first weekend, we can cut expenses back, but also we have an opportunity to find some new revenue sources instead of doing the same thing year over year.
Okay, and has the funding model for sort of the wineries changed at all? Like, is that still generally the same as it's always been in terms of their participation and their, you know, what they collect when they're at the park and selling wine and things like that? Is that generally sort of the same as it ever was?
It is and it isn't. We've tried to keep it consistent. A lot of the wineries, in spite of what many people think, they're really struggling, specifically with staffing and human resource issues. But they are struggling the same way a lot of other small businesses are struggling. Most of them are small businesses. So we've tried to keep their fees relatively constant so that they're able to participate and be active in these kind of activities. But we are asking a little bit more of them for things that don't cost money. So assisting with marketing, assisting with promotional opportunities, things like that.
Okay, thank you. That's it for me.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. I will say I'm very excited at the idea of a different weekend than having it in Montebello Park both weekends. When we had our conversation, and I think it's important for people to, when we look at the cost and the cost that you have incurred, is when it came to volunteers this year, there was because I know our neighbor is a volunteer and he was in the park, I think 12 hours a day. But could you just talk a little bit about how you had to bridge the lack of volunteers this year?
Sure, yeah, that I think is for us, one of the biggest impacts of COVID. Volunteers haven't come back. So we were down 50% last year. about 40% this year. And for festivals of our size, and imagine the amount of shifts, we traditionally would have about 500 volunteer shifts a year. We didn't come close to being able to fill them. So we ended up having to spend $30,000 that wasn't budgeted to hire temporary staff, some through an agency and some just through our own recruiting efforts to fill those spaces. So that again, back to that first weekend and why we would like to renovate it. If we can put all of our volunteers focused on the parade weekend, which is the signature weekend, and do things in the first weekend that require less volunteers and less human resources until that sector rebounds, that would be great for us.
Thank you, and again, I'm really looking forward to
We have some
a
really cool
renovated
ideas.
idea. It's exciting. Thanks, Dory.
All right, seeing no other questions of the presenters, thank you very much for the presentation this evening.
Thank you.
Can I have a mover and a seconder to receive the presentation? Councillor Phillips, Councillor Lindell. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. So we will move on to the recommendation in the report. If we could just have that put up on the screen. And could I have a mover and a seconder for that? Councillor Phillips and Councillor Stevens. So we have the recommendation on the screen. And can I have speakers to the motion? Seeing none, I will look to the clerk to call the roll.
Counselor Phillips.
For sure.
Counselor Lindell.
Yes.
Counselor McPherson.
Councillor Stevens is screwed.
Just so if everybody turns their mic on, other people can't turn them on. So, Counselor.
Absolutely.
Counselor Garcia, you have your mic on. I'll go to you next.
Yes.
Okay. Counselor Stevens.
Yes.
Counselor Williamson.
Yes.
Counselor Ratzlaff.
Yes.
Counselor Miller.
Yes.
Counselor Kushner.
Yes.
Counselor Dodge.
Yes.
And Mayor Cisco.
Affirmative.
And that's carried.
All right, moving on to Community Recreation and Culture Services, Programs and Cultural Services. Update from Rodman Art Institute of Niagara. Before discussing the report, I will look to Karen Carter, Director of Rodman Art Institute of Niagara, to provide a presentation. Oh, and Nora Cobb. The lectern is yours.
Good evening. I'm Nora Kalb, Chair of the Board of Directors, and I'm here with Karen Carter, Director at Rodman Art Institute of Niagara, also known as RAIN. In 2021, we came before the Council and got approval for a 3-year early stage investment to help reestablish a public art gallery. We're here to let you know all the great things we've accomplished in 2023 and our plans for 2024, thanks to the support of the City. We are grateful for the City's Recreation and Culture staff's guidance and support, and the support from the City of St. Catharines Mayor and Council. We're excited to continue this partnership and rebuild the gallery in 2024 and beyond under your leadership. Next slide, please. So in 2023, we accomplished a great deal. We engaged Lord Cultural Resources to complete a preliminary feasibility study to build upon their recommendations from the 2022 community consultations. This study provided direction on how to best reestablish the gallery with an anchor in St. Catharines and connections across the Niagara region as a collaborative model which will add the value to the existing arts ecosystem. This approach will allow a cross-pollination between RAIN's audiences and the audiences of other cultural institutions in the region. We leveraged the funding from the city to secure additional project funding of $77,000, plus we received $10,000 in individual donor contributions. These funds have enabled us to deliver programming and begin to put in place new collections management software that includes an online and publicly accessible collection catalog and funding for additional part-time contract positions. Karen will discuss more about the projects we're working on in the next slide. In the summer, we had 50 people attend an event where we hosted the president and CEO of the Art Gallery of Hamilton and the executive director of the Michael Canadian Art Collection at 13th Street Winery to talk about the significance of our permanent collection. With the leadership of the City of St. Catharines Recreation and Culture staff, half of the sculptures from the grounds of Rodman Hall have been placed in their new locations in downtown St. Catharines. You can see the pictures on the slide. The remaining 3 sculptures will find their new home in the spring of 2024. And we'll be developing public art programming to raise awareness around the sculptures. And I'm very excited to let you know that we've signed a lease for a temporary gallery space in downtown St. Catharines on St. Paul Street. This space will allow us to deliver meaningful and inclusive programming and foster engagement with the Rain Art Collection in the new year. Next slide, please.
Good evening, councillors, Mr. Mayor. Thank you again for allowing us the opportunity to depute and to give you some updates on what's happening with us at RAIN. As my board chair so eloquently stated, we're proud of the successes that we've had, and we're grateful for the seed funds that we were able to secure from the city. 2024 will kick off with us starting to focus on projects that we will be delivering both in our space on St. Paul as well as programming that will happen off-site. We were able to secure some funds from TD Bank for Black History Month programming, which will be happening with the African women acting up in Niagara Falls. We're also looking at your support at the $125,000 level, which, as some of you will recall, is a part of the overall $300,000 support that council had committed to assist us with over the 3 years. So we're happy to be at the end of that 3-year cycle and excited about hopefully your excitement of Rodman Art Institute of Niagara being reestablished and this collection being publicly accessible to community again with your support so that we can move forward toward the institution being firmly reestablished. I'm watching the time, so I'm going to jump to the fact that one of the things that is really key for us is that we really use the outcomes from LORD to look at a collaborative model. So this idea of having anchor in St. Catharines, but collaborating across the region to ensure that there is arts and culture for everyone in the region, and that collaboration is directly connected to funding for projects that would happen in those regions. So either the model that we've seen with the Black History Month project, where we went for an application to TD Bank together with the African Women Organization to secure that funding, or in a perfect world, there's municipal funding and regional funding that we believe may come to be unlocked as funding shifts and as confidence in the economy gets back to where we hope it will for culture. I'm going to stop there because I'm over my 5 minutes. Thank you.
But next slide is just our contact information. Oh, Karen covered the
future
planning.
planning. Sorry, I should have said next slide. I did not. My bad.
If you want to take an additional minute or two and finish up, that's fine.
No, I feel like if you have questions, we'll cover things, and so we're good.
Yeah.
Thank you for that offer, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, and if anyone would like to come out to the space, we're in the FOSS building and putting in an accessible washroom in the new year, and love to show it to anyone who'd like to come out. Any questions?
Okay. Thank you for the presentation. You will find I tend to be a fairly lenient chair when it comes to time, especially although the gallery is filled this evening. If presenters need to get information out, it's more important we get it. With that, I will turn it to Councillor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the presentation, and thank you for your incredible efforts to return our art gallery to St. Catharines and to share with the region. To the rest of council, I had the opportunity to tour that new space the other day, and I thought perhaps you can share with council exactly what you can do without a space, because there are so many different things you can do. And I was so pleased to hear, Mr. Mayor, I don't know if you remember her, that the property is owned by former councilor Heather Foss.
Indeed it is. Whenever I hear Foss Building, I think of Heather.
So we are very excited that a former city councilor who clearly is passionate about arts and culture was able to help us secure a footprint. We're excited about being a part of what we believe will be an important cultural corridor in the downtown. For those of us who like the idea of walking to things, you know, and it's nice to be able to park one place and then do that, just walk along the strip. And I believe we're kind of bookending with NAC at one end, and then we're at the other end. We are planning for both thinking about how to use those windows for public art installations, or for rear window projection in the wintertime, as we are moving into a opportunity or a phase where we need to do some retrofitting to the space. So we want to have a fully accessible washroom on the ground floor. We've secured some of the funding towards that work being done. And so we're also looking at just planning for public art as well as art inside the space. We've started to work on getting part-time staff that'll come through some of the Canada federal grants, as well as project money that we've secured for assisting with updating our copyright, allowing us to utilize the artwork through print or other ways in the collection, as well as a marketing strategy that we're doing to update people. I mean, I don't have to tell all of you. There are still people who are calling us Rodman, and we know that to go forward, the Rodman name is a key part of our identity, but that branding of RAIN, it's just nice to not, you know, give up your history. I'm a heritage wonk. I come to my love of culture from the heritage side, but driving forward with that updated branding is going to be a key component for us to really have St. Catharines and the region dream with us about what the future will look like, and to be excited about where we are going, while acknowledging our past, but frankly not dwelling on the past, and looking at what the future will look like for this gallery to be reestablished. So we're really excited about the programming that will come from hiring part-time staff, and then securing money that allows, we all know these are difficult economic times. I'd say it's even more difficult if you're a cultural worker. It's not hard, it's not an easy thing to get those jobs that are full-time. So working towards employment at a part-time level initially, and then hopefully a full-time level for staff is one of the key components that will go right alongside the programming in the space.
Thank you.
Councilor Ratzlaff. Oh, my apologies then. Councilor Ratzlaff, if you want to turn off.
Yep.
And then I will open up Councilor Garcia, and if you want to plug back in.
Yeah, thank you for the answers, and I just wanted to double check, you talked about it, but will the balance of the sculptures be installed in '24?
Yes, we are planning for the spring of '24, and it literally was just a situation where the earth had become, it was cold, and so you couldn't ensure that the install would be secure for reintroducing, and these are the sculptures that will actually be at the front of City Hall. So it was a choice made just because of the timing and temperature, so we need the earth to be warmer for us to finish that work.
That's great, and when that's completed, I would suggest that you work closely with the city's communications department to make sure that the rest of the community finds out about this, because it's such a great initiative, and because it's being done piecemeal, I'm not sure that people understand what's happening, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely, our plan is programming around what the sculptures are, what they mean. The sixth one will be behind the Performing Arts Center, and that one, the patina's being restored right now. So that's part of it, definitely programming. And one of our board members has developed a Art in the City website, and so that features all the different art that's outside, and so we hope to have that updated and use that as a good means to show people where there is art to see in the city.
Thank you. Okay, that's okay.
All right, Councilor Ratzlaff, followed by Councilor Williamson.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you. Thanks for the presentation. Really excited that you found a spot on St. Paul Street. Couldn't have picked a better part of the city, in my opinion. Through conversations with Councilor McPherson, I've just been really intrigued by ways that we can get the art into public spaces. whether it's through projection or wraps. So I'm excited to continue those conversations. You mentioned in your presentation that you had a presenter, you had a discussion about the importance of a permanent location that's publicly accessible. So maybe if you could, just 1 or 2, 3 reasons why a permanent location that's publicly accessible is so important, or can, will add value to residents of St. Catharines.
My professional brand as a cultural worker is about art being as publicly accessible through non-traditional means as possible. It's one of the reasons I was interested in this work, about how to rebuild a cultural institution that's not, frankly, the traditional way of you all sit in a room quietly, you raise all the money, and then you have a master plan, and then you have to get the $300 million to go get the big building in one place. And between those ideas in a circle quietly and the big building, you often, frankly, lose the audience, and then you have to rebuild that audience when the building opens. And so this model of securing the space earlier, focusing on rebuilding the community relationships, thinking, frankly, about the arts ecosystem. How can we partner with the existing cultural organizations to show value? I think a lot of people want to know that public money is being spent well and that they can actually see where the impact is going, frankly, not just in difficult economic times, but overall. And then that ability for programming, frankly, also helps you to secure your volunteers, helps you, I think, the things we're doing helped us to recruit the right board members. It helps you to secure the individual donors, and it also helps you when you are reporting on or getting grant money from provincial or federal funders, because they want to know what you're doing. So it's harder to get money for just the planning phase, frankly, unless you find a benefactor, you know, floating in money who wants to say, I want my name on this and then I'll pay for the whole thing. But those models are going away. I think we saw that during COVID. A lot of people who had large benefactors focused on one thing said that a more dispersed, more community-centered model for rebuilding cultural institutions or expanding on ones that exist is really the way we're moving forward for fundraising. So that space to gather, for people to see, oh, this is where the collection is. Because we also have a lot of people saying, where's the collection? So what are you guys doing? So physically having that space to pull people in again, I think will give us a much more impactful roadmap for reestablishing the institution. And from a practical standpoint, I think for you as counselors, it just allows you to say, hey, if someone asks what's going on with Rodman, you can say, well, they actually have a place right on St. Paul. You can go see for yourself. So for us, that space really gives us the ability to show people what we're doing, right, and gives them a clear roadmap for how to engage for the institution's rebuild in the long run and stability in the long run for the city and for the region. And also I'll say, it shows the leadership that this city has, because frankly, you've led, and hopefully others will follow in showing how important culture is for the region.
One of the things we identified as part of our mission is education. And so having a space where we can have people in and learning about art and seeing it and being right in there is a really core important part. So we need a space like this temporary space, but it's another reason for a long-term space.
Oh, that's wonderful. It's great to hear the community-centric approach. I think that a lot of people talk about division in our community, and I think one of the things that we need to relearn how to do is empathize with one another. And one of the things art can do is expand our imagination, allow us to exercise that muscle of imagining ourselves in someone else's shoes. And so I'm super excited that you're downtown and that you're focused on education and you're community-centered. I think that's going to be really great for our community. So thanks.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Nora and to Karen. I would gather that a big part of your responsibility is stewardship and care of this large collection. And I would assume most of it needs some form of a climate-controlled environment. I wonder if you could just tell us about how it's being handled. Well, you don't necessarily have to give us specifics on locations if you don't want to.
So we do
see where the valuable collections is located.
So thank you for that, Councillor. The collection is in art storage. Percentage of the collection, I believe it's about 35%, is cultural property. So that is work we can't just show in this space, but there's a great deal of the collection that is not. I will say, though, that the budget we would need to take even those that are not cultural properties out, we're not there yet, and that's why the copyright is so important, because there are things you can do with projection, with making copies of images of work, and then we've started, again, with the partnership and community. We were at the, I'm sure most of you know, John Mann just rebranded the 13th Street Gallery as the Mann Gallery. Myself and our staff member, Isabel, were there at the opening on Thursday, and 80% of that work are artists who are in the Rodman collection. So having that awareness of where the touch points in the community, where you could partner to show some of that work, either new work from those artists or maybe partner. We're having a meeting with Margie, the gallery director or manager, to see what we could partner on. So there's ways to show you what's in the collection without the physical costs at this early stage of having to pull work. And then, as I said, between projection, because we're frankly extremely blessed for a collection over 1,000 pieces that it's digitized. So we do have the opportunity for the projection, which is why we're looking at that as an early way of testing what we can show to show people what's in there. Because the reason for, as Nora stated, wanting to get the full space back at some point is we need the temperature control, and that HVAC system we would need for the proper humidity and so forth is not in this space. But we do have the ability to show some of the work once we've planned effectively, had ability to access it. And I actually think it's an opportunity to give local artists who aren't in the collection, because like a lot of the collections built in this time, it wasn't hyper focused on local, and nor frankly is it hyper representative. There's a lot of men, not so many women, not so many racialized people. So there's other opportunities to kind of show what might be out there. Because as a cultural institution, you're thinking, what's 200 years looks like for this collection in the long run. So you're correct that the temperature circumstances of this space will not allow for full museum shows. But there are a lot of opportunities because not everything is cultural properties.
And covering the cost of the storage of the bulk of the collection, your group is covering that cost now? And could you give us an idea on that?
To the endowment?
Yeah, we were fortunate to get some money through an endowment when we took on the collection that is earmarked just for the care of the collection. So we can use money, and it's invested, and use that, because it is expensive. It's about $7,000 a month to store the collection. We had some other storage, stuff that wasn't in the official collection. We have another 800 pieces that we kept in local storage, and now that we have this space, we have the basement as well, so we don't have to pay for that storage anymore. We have it in this space as well. So yeah, so that's a big part of that kind of nest egg that we have that help pay for that storage.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor Williamson. Seeing no other speakers, thank you very much to the presenters for your presentation this evening. Can I get a mover and a seconder for the presentation? Councillor McPherson, Councillor Garcia. All those in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Can I get a councillor to move the recommendation in the report? Councillor McPherson, Councillor Lindell. Any speakers to the motion? All right, seeing none, I will look to the clerk to call the roll.
Councillor McPherson.
Yes.
Councillor Lindell.
Yes.
Councillor Stevens.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Ratzlaff.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia. Yes. Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
And Mayor Cisco.
Yes.
And that's carried.
Wonderful. Moving on to item 9.3, prior to discussing the report, I will look to Mr. Slater, who is going to speak to the report. You could go that way. And the lectern is yours.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, city staff and councillors. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I haven't really prepared anything for this, but first of all, I should apologise for my dress because I didn't get the memo about the dress code this evening, by the way.
We'll overlook it this evening, Mr. Slater.
I've had the opportunity of reading the report that's been put out under your item 9.3, and it seems to me that there are two categories of volunteers. And unfortunately, the Port Dalhousie BWC, of which I've been the president for the past 6 years, doesn't seem to fit in one that benefits us in any way, it seems, unless I'm misreading something somewhere. It's been a struggle to keep things moving. We are a non-profit group. We do have a board of directors, which seems to mean, according to how I've read this, that this is precluding us from getting some of the benefits unless we work directly under the city's auspice. And as you probably know, we did run a whole series of concerts and things in Port Dalhousie in the Loch last year, which were extremely successful, which brought about 3,000 to 4,000 people into the area over the summer period and gave a great upward fillip to the businesses, the local businesses. All of those businesses are bitterly disappointed that we've been unable to come to terms on running this again, because these concerts were supposed to have been run as a almost free concert for the community, with whatever they could throw in the tin to cover the cost of the bands and such, and also to give an element of tourism to the area and an element of an uplift for the businesses that had suffered so badly over the past three and a half years or whatever it was. So this report, as much as I can read, and I'd like perhaps to have the opportunity of sitting with someone who can explain it more clearly to me, but it seems not to do anything for the Port Dalhousie Beautification Works Committee. That's about all I have to say.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Slater. Questions? Councilor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Slater, for coming tonight. And perhaps you can share with the rest of council, because I know Councilor Williamson and I and the mayor are really familiar with the struggle you've been through in terms of the law concerts. But for example, the way I read the report, like you, you're in a different situation, according to staff. The Port Dalhousie Conservancy, the same, and other organizations that either have a board of directors or have some revenue, minimal as it might be. It means you sell a couple of trinkets or something. But discuss and share with us what a challenge it was to try to continue running those concerts with the requirement, first of all, of a lease, and secondly, of the insurance that was required.
We have to go back to probably 2017, when the lock was repurposed. It would appear the Kiwanis were the leading people in that. In fact, it was the BWC that did all the work and got it to happen, but we needed the Kiwanis as a front, because they alone could give tax receipts to people that were benefactors to us. So then along came COVID and nothing happened, and then it took probably a little over a year for me to get sight of a new lease, which was due to run out in early March of 2022. And it was about 9 or 10 months later than that I got the first sight of the lease, which was quite inoperable under the way in which we had set up to run our concerts and to run our minor fundraisings and things like that. The concerts, we used to go around and just collect from the people. And in fact, if you were to take 3,000 as a very low number of people that came, and you were to look at the revenue that we actually collected for the 16 concerts, it averaged at about $3.50 a person. So it was pretty low-cost entertainment for a 2 to 3 hour show in the evenings. The struggle was that the lease was inoperable for us because there was so many punitive things on it. Firstly, there was never a description of what the lock was, a physical description, and yet there were numbers being put on it as to how many people we could have. We had no intention of selling tickets. The idea was not to sell any tickets, but to have it as a free, open concert series. And we used a lot of local talent for that, largely local talent for that. We were then faced with having to have $5 million worth of liability insurance, which was outside of the realms, on top of which, when we went back and rediscussed this with staff, there was an opportunity to do it by way of a permit. Unfortunately, the permit was $357, if I recall correctly, per evening. That has to be booked ahead of time, and since we weren't selling anything, we weren't selling drinks or food or charging for tickets, then the ability to recoup that money, were it to be rained off or whatever, was lost. If we were to follow the guidelines of the 250 people, then we would have to have some fencing, which means we've got to have security, which means we've got to sell tickets, we've got to count heads, and these are all things that are way beyond our little limited volunteer capabilities. So that was a struggle.
Thank you very much. It's obvious to me that we need to come up with a different way of dealing with organizations such as the BWC, but I'll leave it at that, Mr. Mayor, in case anybody else has any questions.
Any other questions from council? Councillor Ratzlaff.
Thanks.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for, I just missed the beginning of your presentation. I'm sorry, I had to jump out for the bathroom. But the $300 permit, so this is something that I've dealt with quite a bit as well. Is that $300 like after you've applied for the 50% discount, or is that before? And is that
well, I only learned about a 50% discount about a week ago.
Oh, okay.
See, no one's come forth with that.
Right. So this is something that before I was a counselor, working with, when Mayor Cisco was a counselor, we got through. But it does require that you pay it up front, and then you get it after, you get the 50% back afterwards, which is also can be challenging. I understand. I don't have any other questions, but otherwise say that I empathize
really wasn't
with your
a question,
position.
though, was it? No.
Well, I was wondering if you were aware with the 50% discount.
No, I wasn't aware. That's about
was
a week ago. In fact, I read it somewhere in something that just cropped up when I was sort of.
And the 250 people that was associated with the permit that you're applying for, is that?
No, we haven't applied for a permit, so.
So, no, but if you went that route.
Yes.
That was the permit dictates how many people that you can have, is that right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
But without a description of the area, because part of the audience, as Councillor Williamson will know, because I've seen him there many times, was hanging over the fence at the side to look at the show.
Yeah.
So it's quite out of our control as to how many people are actually in the lock and how many people are outside of the lock. On a hot sunny evening, many people sit under the trees there.
Certainly. Yeah. No, thanks.
Yeah, okay.
Sounds like Councillor Williamson hangs out where I hang out whenever I'm there.
That's right.
Councillor McPherson.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for your presentation. Just, you mentioned that you're so you're a registered not-for-profit?
Yes.
Okay. And do you have, I'm just curious, are there sponsors for other events or things that you do, or do you have corporate sponsorship or local community
Occasionally, when we can get it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I guess the question since you're saying you kind of don't fit into the way that the report has been written or the recommendation, what would you be looking for the city to do? How could the city or help or specifically?
Let us continue to run as we did last year, but with having some kind of coverage. In fact, the city owns the property. They should have some responsibility for it at the same time as us.
Okay.
Shared responsibility, partnership, if you like.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Kushner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question was just answered.
All right. If there are no other questions, thank you, Mr. Slater.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And can I have a motion to receive the presentation? Councillor Garcia, Councillor Kushner, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. So we have a recommendation for the report that we'll put up onto the screen. As a reminder to councillors, there is a confidential memo located in Sugar Sink. If anybody has any questions related to it, which they may, given the presentation, we would need a motion to go in camera. So I'm going to first ask for a mover and a seconder for the motion. Councillor Williamson, Councillor Garcia. So the motion is now on the floor. Is there a motion to go in camera to ask questions related to the confidential memo? All right, seeing none. Does anybody wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Lots to say here. I'd like to thank staff for finally preparing this report, but I must say it's been frustrating for me and very disappointing that I first requested this in April of this year, and it's taken at least 8 months to come up to this stage. And specifically, my report request was asking for a recommendation as to how to address some of the issues that volunteers that have limited or no revenue have. And unfortunately, the report doesn't even include that. It essentially says we need something else now, which is going to happen in 2024. So, number one, I would ask, I don't know if this is just direction to staff or we need to add it to the motion, I would ask that it be no later than Q1 of 2024 because the volunteers have waited long enough. And secondly, as Mr. Slater mentioned, and I read as well, yes, and I understand why the report identifies that there are differences in volunteers that have programs that are directed by the city, like some of the community gardens and others, and those that are not. But I would like to ensure that staff take it as direction, I believe is the way to do it, to please look into very closely working with our insurance provider to find a way that volunteers like the Beautification and Works Committee that are doing all this work for the community, and I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting what they did for this candlelight stroll, which was amazing, so that they can abide or take advantage of the same benefit that other community organizations have, whereby they can somehow benefit from the insurance coverage that the city has, because obviously they may have to pay something. I'm not saying get it for free necessarily, but if it is under a big umbrella, then it should always be more efficient than for a separate organization and a small organization to go out and get it. And I would like to share with my fellow councilors another situation which is quite similar to the Beautification and Works Committee, and that some of you are familiar with. I know the mayor is familiar with, and that is the Port Lucie Conservancy. And they specifically have this situation where they do a lot for the community, but in this particular case, they have this last trolley shed of the NS&T Railway, which is a very historic railway, as most of you would know. And this is a real piece of our heritage. And the Port Lucie Conservancy have actually retrieved this shed from where it was kept for years. They used their own money they raised to take it to Willowbank School of Restoration in Queenston to get it restored properly. They have paid for a special trailer to carry it around because the building is a little high, and on a trailer it can't go under the overpasses. They have stored it. They have a permit from the Heritage Committee to locate it at the top of the lock there where Mr. Slater was talking about for the concerts. And they're offering to actually take the property on as a lease from the city and pay for that lease and pay for the maintenance of this. And on top of that, they have been asked to, and the Deputy CEO can correct me if I'm wrong on the number, but I believe they were asked to carry $5 million liability insurance, which again, a small organization with very little revenue, and my understanding is that this is going to cost like another $1,300 a year or something like that. So something like this to me is a perfect example of why, when we come back with a policy, it should address a way that insurance can be addressed under the city's policy. Mr. Mayor, am I correct that that's okay as direction, or do I need to make an amendment?
I think that's clear direction, but I'll look to the Deputy CAO.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Garcia. Our intent with this report, and thank you for your comments, and thank you to Mr. Slater for the conversations that we've had, so we identified when we were writing this report, we took an inventory of all the groups we work with and asked why is it easier for some volunteer groups to access the city's services and resources and maybe other supports than others. So came up with kind of an inventory, and you're quite right. There is a group under the non-program-based volunteers on page 4 that aren't associated with a specific program. And as a result, it can be, I think for both staff and the volunteer groups, a little bit like recreating the wheel in order to get the types of services that these groups need, and for staff to be able to provide that in a seamless manner. So the intent of creating the stewardship program that's recommended in the motion is identifying that a lot of these groups have the same types of needs, but there's no program for them that pre-exists at the city to be able to offer those supports in a way that perhaps the community rink program offers or the community garden program offers. So the recommendation is really to create such a program where access to the city would be easier, and in addition, to make sure from a staff perspective that we're providing these services to all volunteer groups in a way that's fair and equitable across the city. We did work very, very closely with our insurance providers in the preparation of this report, and lengthy conversation, so I acknowledge Councillor Garcia that it has taken some time. And in terms of getting insurance for this, the kind of what we've heard back is in the report, and as well as the confidential memo. By clarifying the uses and creating a program, we'll go back to them because we are able, through some of these pre-existing programs, to obtain support for. But because there's no pre-existing program at the city, our hope is to create one that is for those groups that are mentioned under additional community associations, committees, and friends of groups. That's listed on page 4 to make access easier, also equitable for groups across the city.
Thank you, Deputy CAO. Councillor Phillips.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I, like Councillor Garcia, I'm really upset with the way this is. When I look at the non-program-based volunteers, I see my friends at Malcolmson Park and Walker's Creek, and all of a sudden, we'll use the insurance example, they're going to have to start paying for insurance. I'll use the example of the Friends of Walker's Creek. Is that the case? Am I correct in saying that?
So would I be correct that we should be going in camera? Yeah, so I need a motion to go in camera.
Okay.
Councillor, I think there's actually a bunch of questions that want to come about that confidential
Okay,
memo.
I'll make the move to go in camera then.
Thank you, Councillor. Seconder? Councillor McPherson, all those in favor? Opposed? In camera we go. Are we back, Rexy? We're back. Wonderful. For those in the community who are curious, we went in camera for the following reason. It was a motion to go into closed session for community recreation and culture services, business planning and strategic services, support for community volunteers organizations. Closed session pursuant to Municipal Act 2001 as amended, section 239(2)F. Advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. That's why we went. So with that, we are back out. Do I need a motion to receive? All right, so we're just back to the recommendation that's on the screen. And I will now turn to, I believe I had, or Councilor Garcia? Yeah. Can we just turn on Councilor Garcia's mic?
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to add something there for clarity. Do I do that now, or?
If you can just hold on.
Okay.
We do need to add by the end of Q1 2024 to the motion.
Yes, and with the direction from council or something to be specific.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so I've got Councilor Ratzlaff is up next.
Yes. Thank you, Mayor. I do not remember what I was going to ask, so. Like, this is the speaking order from before? Yeah, okay. If it comes back to me, I'll push the button again.
I'm hoping it doesn't. Councilor Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In terms of the community concerts that were held in the refurbished lock in Port Dalhousie, they were quite popular, and it was the BWC that got them started, and they were well attended. And after COVID, they were a kind of a therapeutic thing where people were really happy to get out and get together and experience some positive energy. I really appreciate the efforts that staff has done in terms of trying to overcome some of the hurdles that have come up in terms of getting appropriate liability coverage, et cetera, and appreciate the fact that they're willing to go back to or continue working on this to try and make it a situation where we're able to once again have these community concerts happen. I want to certainly thank my colleague, Councilor Garcia, who's led the charge and also pressed hard to for the cause of making this important community event back after last summer we weren't able to do it. So once again, appreciate everybody trying to do their best to make things happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Seeing no other speakers to the motion, Councilor Garcia, so we wanted to add by the end of quarter 1, 2024, and that staff proceed as directed by council. And just for clarity, I will look to the Deputy CAO. She understands the direction there. Yes, wonderful. We'll just wait for that to come up on the screen, and then I will look to the clerk to call the roll. You know, it's always interesting during council meetings. I never know what's going to take the lion's share of our time. I try to predict it. I'm wrong every meeting. Madam Clerk?
Councillor Williamson?
Yes.
Councillor Garcia?
Yes.
Councillor Miller?
Yes.
Councillor Ratzlaff?
Yes.
Councillor Dodge?
Yes.
Councillor Lindell?
Yes.
Councillor Stevens?
Yes.
Councillor Phillips?
Yes.
Councillor McPherson?
Yes.
And Mayor Cisco?
Yes.
And that's carried.
All right, at this time, I will ask Deputy Mayor Phillips to take the chair as I'll be moving this upcoming motion.
Thank you, Mayor. Prior to discussing this motion, council will hear a delegation from Nathan Fisher. I'll now call Mr. Fisher to present. I guess he'll be presenting behind me. Mr. Fisher?
Hello.
Hello, we can hear you.
Great. My name is Nathan Fisher. I'm a resident of Western Hill.
I was brought here tonight by one of your fellow councilors as a recommendation to step forward. My interest in this is kind of across 3 points. One is protection of our agricultural land. I think that if we can increase density within our existing R1 and R2 zoning permit, that will help us with that. The second point is affordability, which I'm sure has been debated to no end. And I'd very much like to see across the spectrum from housing first for people that are on the streets in St. Catharines, all the way through to low income, up to just making, you know, the everyday man. And then the third point that I think is important is that I think that this would help facilitate sustainability of income to services and infrastructure. As I understand, we're on a $63 million deficit, which is about $1,000 a household. And so if we have appropriate density within the city, then I think that will help with those things. There are a couple of questions that I would present. I don't know if that's something that is appropriate. My first time, obviously. One is the zoning doesn't specifically, from what I'm seeing as the motion, doesn't specifically reference commerce shops, and would this be considered with that? So things like Lake Street. The second point would be, does it limit development to only the existing residential areas, or would that also be put into consideration, the A1 zoning and such? And then the third point was that, or the third question I would ask is, are there any provisions for low-income housing? So a percentage of the housing being dedicated to either people at risk on the streets or people that are well below the means of being able to afford a house on their own. In terms of the general zoning, the thing that kind of struck the conversation was a recent passing of removing of exclusionary zoning in Alexandria, Virginia. So I imagine many of the councilors are familiar with strong towns, and they advocate for increasing walkability, creating social zones within cities, et cetera. So that's it from my side. I will happily hand it back to the council.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Do I have any questions from council? Councilor Ratzlaff?
Thank you. Through you, Deputy Mayor. Thanks for the presentation, Mr. Fisher. It's great when residents are willing to speak to important issues like this one here. You mentioned an example of a city that removed all exclusionary zoning. And I'm just wondering, now we have this motion on the floor, was there any consideration of that? And what would the consequences of expanding this be for our city to, so that's kind of a question I can't ask for staff. Right.
Question for the delegate at this point? You can ask that question to staff later.
Yeah, no, I'm recognizing my mistake now. Thank you. I'll just point out that part of the presentation was great, and hopefully we'll come back to it in a second here.
I'm sure we will.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any further questions from council? Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Can I get a councilor to move the motion to receive the delegation, please? Mayor Cisco, seconded by Councilor Lindell. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Fisher. I think that's all we have from you for tonight. Mayor Cisco, do you want to speak to that?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I appreciate the opportunity to introduce this today. This is something we've talked about now for a couple of months. We did pass the Municipal Housing Pledge earlier this year with the strategy attached to it. One of the pieces of the strategy was to identify changes that we can make to our zoning to ensure that we're allowing as many new housing units to be built in the city of St. Catharines. As we know, the city has been built out to its urban boundary. So any opportunities that we are able to take advantage of have to look at increasing density. Myself and a number of other councillors have pushed many of our large shopping areas to identify parking lots that may be able to be converted into housing or have housing above the parking lot. This, however, is another opportunity. It's something that the federal government, through the Housing Accelerator Fund, has identified as an important step, that is adopting more as-of-right zoning measures that allow for more units to be built. So the the motion today is very simple, asking staff to come back with the zoning bylaw and official plan amendments by the end of the first quarter of next year. That would allow for the as-of-right development of up to 4 residential units on lots in neighborhoods citywide, with provisions that staff deem necessary, which I think allows staff to be able to use their professional lens to identify how best to incorporate this step going forward. As I had mentioned earlier this evening, we do have a zoning or a housekeeping amendment bylaw coming forward to deal with zoning policy. This could fit into that process. So the motion, I think, is timely. And as I said, we have seen a number of municipalities across the country move in this direction, recognizing that this is the next step as we try to build our way out of the housing crisis as much as is possible. So I would urge my colleagues to support this so that we can continue to take the steps we need to get 11,000 homes built. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Ratzlaff?
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Deputy Mayor. Just to kind of ask some of the questions that were raised in that presentation. So just the first one, the citywide exclusion, or citywide, this motion applies citywide, including existing residential and places like Lake Street. And just a question of staff. I assume that that's the case? I'm not staff anymore. Yeah, I'm not looking, I'm looking behind you.
Looking through.
CA Oaks?
I can't think, it's always looking back.
Director Kate is on screen with us. She could answer that, I'm sure. Director Kate?
Thank you. Through the chair to the councillor, yes, the motion as written, will apply citywide, and that does include Lake Street.
Thank you. And then just to follow up with 2 other questions that I think you'll be able to answer. In terms of like affordable housing, I know that in our CIP we do have accessory dwelling units. There is a grant that's available for folks who are building, but then that grant is tied to what the rent will be. Is that correct?
Through the chair to the councillor, yes, through our CIP program, we have an accessory dwelling unit program, which assists with the creation of accessory dwelling unit construction in singles, semis, and I believe townhouses to help with that gentle density and multifamily and generational living. Offhand, I can't recall if it's tied to a certain rental amount. I can look that up and reconfirm for council, but it does, the grant up to $20,000 is for the creation of the unit itself.
Thanks. And then my final question, and I have one comment, but was there any discussion of what they're doing in other cities, which is just removing exclusionary zoning, what that might mean for St. Catharines?
Thank you. So just through the chair to the councillor, the accessory dwelling unit program is not tied to rent. So I wanted to provide that clarification. In terms of exclusionary zoning, what this means for most municipalities is that there are single residential, or used to be referred to as single family zoning in communities. The city of St. Catharines has not had exclusionary zoning since 2013. We're actually going to be celebrating the 10th anniversary of the city's zoning bylaw this weekend. When that bylaw was approved, our lowest density zoning includes singles, semis, and right up to townhouse development in the lowest density zones. So we took care of that issue 10 years ago to be proactive in this regard. We're now responding to new provincial legislation around up to 3 residential units per lot, and through this motion, we'll be expanding that consideration to 4.
Excellent. That's really helpful information. I love it that you mark zoning birthdays. I think that's super fun. Just my comment, I think that the points brought up by the presenter and Mayor Cisco are right on. I mean, it's cheaper to build or to renovate a space or to add on to a space and to build brand new units. And by the very nature of these types of units, they're generally cheaper. I built one myself in my basement. And I think that, if we want to, it helps the tax base, it addresses affordability. The only thing that I would add is these units will be built after 2018, meaning there won't be rent control on these units. And so I think it's really important that, as we consider passing this, that we also remember that we really need to bring rent control back to the city, because there's no guarantee that these units can remain affordable. I'm having residents come to me saying, they're seeing the rent increase to 300% a month, year over year, and that's just really, really unsustainable. We're going to need rent control. We're going to need the region and the city to continue demanding that the province reinstate rent control for units built after 2018. So I'm in support of this. I think it's great. I think it's what the city needs. So thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Through you to Director Kite, I can certainly understand the need for this motion and to build more housing. I just wanted to ask the Director to clarify. I assume that when you work on a bylaw such as this, that you will carefully consider sizes of lots in terms of ability to fit more units in, and also height, just to make sure that when we build these 4 units, they are compatible with the neighborhood in some way.
Through the chair to the councillor, yes, that's correct. And it has been captured in the motion that's currently on the screen, where the motion author had put that staff would be coming forward with the provisions, zoning provisions as staff deem appropriate. And we will, of course, be doing public consultation on the draft amendments as well. But yes, those are the types of performance standards that we would consider in the preparation of the bylaw that we would bring to council.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I'm also supportive. I think, as the Director of Planning just mentioned, the most important line here is the last one, where such provisions as staff deem appropriate. We seem to be really hung up on quantity, numbers of housing that we have to build, somewhat artificial numbers, 11,000, et cetera. But Councillor Garcia alluded to the fact that we have to have compatibility, and we have to do this in a way that not only, achieves some numbers, but also keeps in mind quality of life issues. And I know, and particularly talks about the size of lots as well. Always we have to be cognizant of the fact that we declared a climate change emergency, and everything we do should be in line with that and do things in an environmentally sustainable manner. So I know our planning staff is always cognizant of that, conscious of that, and we'll make sure that that's happening. I'd also be interested, there could be some property tax implications involved in this as you divide lots up into smaller pieces, and I'm not sure if that needs to be an amendment, but maybe that impact should be in the report if that's possible. Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I'm not sure if the Director of Planning would speak to that or prefer to pass that along, but do you think it's necessary, Madam Director, for the property tax implications to be considered?
Director Kite.
Through the chair to the councillor, typically when typically when the planning staff provide an opinion report, it'll be on land use planning matters as to what can support the performance standards that could support the land use, and in this case up to 4 dwelling units, and what that configuration may or may not look like. In terms of property tax implications, it would be rather difficult to try and provide implications for all properties that would say be zoned R1 in the community with this additional use. So if we think back to 2013, when we did have an R1 zone that was, predominantly only allowed single detached residential dwelling, and then all of a sudden that zone included semis and townhouses and other lower density street oriented housing, that already provided that additional land value by the range of permitted uses. So it can be surmised that by going up to 4 units per lot could also have that same effect, but it would be very difficult, I think, to calculate what that could be on an entire range of issues, from lot frontage to lot size to how many units are there now to the state of the property. So I'm not sure that we could provide any meaningful data in that regard, but through adding additional permissions to lands, there will be an upward pressure on the value of that land.
Thank you. And just one other question. We haven't looked favorably upon flag lots in the past. Has the thinking on that changed?
Through the chair to the councillor, the issue with flag lots, it's typically from a streetscape perspective, and when we're reviewing this as a new land use and what those lot provisions are, we will consider that, but I won't say that at this time our opinion has changed.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dodge.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Through you to staff, I think. When I know that we've had lots of different planning issues come forward and pressures put on everybody in Ontario. So when you're looking at the zoning bylaw and the planning amendments and stuff like that, are you going to be looking at the social infrastructure, the impacts that has on wherever we're going to allow this to happen throughout the city, as well as our infrastructure, like Councillor Williamson mentioned about, our what we're doing to our environment and whatnot. So are those things that are going to be looked at when you're doing this zoning bylaw amendments?
Director Cathay.
Through the chair to the councillor, in terms of social infrastructure, I'm going to assume you mean parks and schools and things like that. We usually reach out to that level of groups through official plan amendments. We have been meeting with the school board on matching St. Catharines growth targets with what they've been using for accommodations, and they will be part of the discussion and the circulation on our amendments moving forward, so that they understand the impacts moving forward of potentially having additional units on existing lots and what this gentle density could mean for school board accommodations. Our parks, as you know, have been, as we're not building new parks through greenfield development, we're looking at improving and potentially growing our existing park infrastructure, and we will be including CRCS in those conversations, particularly as they move forward with their parks master planning work in future years.
Okay, and when I said about our social infrastructure, that included things like the support for the people that would be living there, hospitals, doctors, that type of stuff. When we're doing this, I think that we need to take those types of things into consideration as well. If we are trying to build up our population and be more open to people, I think we also have to make sure that we can take care of the people that we're building homes for. So when it comes to the target of the 11,000, how close are we going to be to that target?
Through the mayor to the through the chair to the councillor, it's our we're doing everything in our power and through our policy environment and our policies and procedures to get to that target. So initially that target was identified through our growth management work through Official Plan Amendment 26 and captured in our official plan, captured in the region's official plan, and it was essentially that data that was used from the province to come down with the growth targets, albeit within a tighter time period. While we monitor our growth on a quarterly basis as we report up to the province, and we will be providing the mayor and council in the new year with an update on where we are on an annual basis. This year has been a slower year, as we've noted through the market conditions, the rising interest rates, the increased stress tests on mortgages and stuff, and applications have been down this year. That's not to say that next year we're anticipating a more plateau, if not a retraction on some of those items, and we hope to see that that demand that's built up for the past year dissipating and moving forward. So while this may be a slow year, future years may not be, and it's a 10-year horizon that we need to target to.
Thank you. And when we're just in there where it says about the funding, I'm not sure who would answer this question, but are we expecting to get any funding while we're building this to help with to offset some of the costs that are incurred by the municipality, or is this just something that we're going to get after the build outs happen?
Through the chair to the councillor, I'm not quite sure that I can fully anticipate accurately what the federal government may or may not do with the Housing Accelerator Fund. So the city is actively making an application, and we certainly hope to be successful, but until such time a determination is made, I'm not sure that we can make any commitments around what any award money may or may not be used for.
Thank you.
Okay.
CA Oaks has something I think he'd like to add to that.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Actually, Director Kate answered the question. We do have there's two programs. There's the Federal Housing Accelerator Fund that we are an applicant to. This is one of the pieces that will allow us a higher level of probability, I guess is probably the best way to say that. There's also a fund that was created by the province for us to meet our targets. So the intent of all of these types of policy reviews and housekeeping amendments are really to allow us to be able to achieve the targets, which would then make us eligible for some additional funding. So all of those are on the table.
Thank you, Director. And I think to add to that, when you think about the city of St. Catharines, there are quite a few large pieces of land that are ready to be developed, and our planning department are more than willing and ready to get those site plans going. It's just a case of developers having to come in and start building. And I think we'll be well within that number in the time, as long as we get developers interested in starting to build. Any further questions from council? Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Chair. A question to planning, I believe. So with the zoning changes, so with the report to come back, would it also, how would that include, or does it change if we're allowing more units on a property now, or would that fall under existing for committee of adjustment stuff, like for parking and that as well? So like, I know we're encouraging accessory dwellings in basements and stuff. So with respect to parking it's a single dwelling home now, all of a sudden converted to a basement apartment. How is the parking looked at on situations? Is that just by each unit, or will it be covered under any kind of bylaw or anything?
Director Kate.
Through the chair to the councillor, that will be one of the recommendations that come forward with an eventual zoning bylaw as to what a parking calculation may or may not be to accommodate up to 4 units on a lot in an R1 zone.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Director. Seeing no further questions, I'll pass the baton over to the clerk to take the roll, please.
Mayor Cisco,
Yes.
Councillor Ratzlaff,
Yes.
Councillor Williamson,
Yes.
Councillor Dodge,
Yes.
Councillor Garcia,
Yes.
Councillor Stevens,
Yes.
Councillor Lindell,
Yes.
Councillor Miller,
Affirmative.
Councillor McPherson,
Affirmative.
and Deputy Mayor Phillips.
Yes.
And that's carried.
All right. Call for notices of motion. I'm assuming there are none, given that the next meeting is not for a month. Seeing none. Report requests. I believe Councillor Stevens will be making the first one in the absence of Councillor Townsend. The staff prepare a report by Q2 2024 comparing our current permit process to Sudbury's, which mandates permits for all contractors, including utilities when road closures are involved. And then I have another report request from Councillor Garcia that staff prepare a report identifying and reviewing the alternatives for addressing the issues and concerns with the self-cleaning washroom, including but not limited to converting it to a standard city-operated public washroom. Are there any other report requests? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Committee and task force minutes. The council receive and file the minutes of the advisory committees of council as presented. Mover and a seconder. Councillor McPherson, Councillor Phillips, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried. There is no closed session. There are no motions arising. Bylaws. The bylaws listed on council agenda as A to G be read a first time, considered and passed, and that they be signed and executed by the mayor and the clerk. Mover and a seconder. Councillor Miller, Councillor Stevens, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And a motion to adjourn. Mover and a seconder. Councillor McPherson, Councillor Garcia. Before anybody goes, those who are wearing or want to be in the photo of all of us looking ridiculous, stick around. All those in favor? Opposed? Merry Christmas.